Well, thanks for coming tonight. My name is Mike Beam. I'm Director of Planning and Engineering for the DOT. It's great to see folks out tonight and hopefully engage in this conversation we want to have over the course of the next hour and a half. What we're going to do tonight, we have a brief presentation, probably about 15 minutes. Thomas and I will kind of walk through the presentation. Thomas is with HDR and they're helping us with the development of electric vehicle charging plans. So Thomas is going to take over some technical things. We'll go through the presentation, and once that's over, we want to invite some questions. So we are going to record the meeting tonight. That's so we can post it online at our sdevplan.com website. So if you haven't been there, write it down. It should be on the information you have in front of you too. That's another opportunity for you to share with your friends or with people that you know how they can get engaged in the process of the development of electric vehicle charging plans. So our role here tonight, of course, is to listen to you. We're very early in the development of a plan. So a plan hasn't been drafted, it's not out for review. We're very early in this process. We're going to get input first, so we can ensure that we have a good plan developed at the end of the development phase. Our plan is recorded to be complete by August 1st of this year, so August 1st of 2022, in order to be eligible for funding through the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. And Thomas is going to hit on that a little bit too. Hopefully when you came in tonight, you were greeted by somebody from the department or with HDR. And if you're uncomfortable asking questions in the big group, we have different stations set up behind you, so you can go ahead and visit all the different things with members of our team. Most of our team is standing in the back, and they'll be wearing a name tag. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to them or myself or whomever you feel comfortable talking to tonight. We are going to open it up at the end again for questions, so if you want to ask a question here, we'd be more than happy to try to answer those. I can tell you right now, I am not an expert in this area. I've been learning quite a bit in this area as we look at potential deployment of electric vehicles. So the meeting agenda tonight and the presentation is really going to follow a few steps. Why should we plan for electric vehicles? And again, Thomas is going to help us through this. The types of EVs and chargers they use, you can see the list out there. But our intent, again, is kind of get that basic understanding for those folks who may not be too familiar with it. For those of you that own electric vehicles or have owned electric vehicles for a long time, you can help share your experiences as well as we look at deployment and development of potential plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Thomas. He's going to get into a little bit more detail on things, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Mike. So to start off with, kind of why are we doing this? Why are we planning for EVs? So if we look at the national landscape, the automakers are introducing a lot of new EV models. We're seeing different EV models with different types of vehicles that are more the types of vehicles that people want to buy, like SUVs and trucks. So as we see that happen, the demand for EVs is expected to really pick up over the next few years. And if we look at what the manufacturers themselves are saying, they're predicting that a lot of their vehicles are going to be EVs in the future. Some of them going so far as to plan on completely doing just EVs by 2035 or 2040. And if we look at this projected sales here on the right, the anticipation is that starting from now and going forward, EVs are really going to take off. And in order to have these EVs, there needs to be charging infrastructure to support them. Otherwise, they're not a feasible technology, and people can't rely on them to do their long-distance travel in addition to their day-to-day travel. When we talk about EVs, there are multiple types of EVs, so we just want to make sure everybody knows what those are and which ones we're talking about for this plan. So the first type is a battery electric vehicle. That's battery power only. So these are vehicles that have to be plugged in order to charge, in order to drive. They can't burn any other type of fuel. They have to have electricity. They typically have longer ranges that are all battery range, 150 to 400 miles being pretty typical with what's coming out on the market today. Another type is the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. These ones can get powered by either electricity or a normal internal combustion engine. The internal combustion engine kind of works as a generator, charges up the battery, but the battery can also be charged externally from another power source. They have a smaller battery than a pure battery electric vehicle. They're only intended to go short ranges on 100% electric, usually 20 to 40 miles. But that is a battery that can be used in sort of an electric-only mode. The final type of electric vehicle is the hybrid electric vehicle. And this is probably the one most people are familiar with. They're the ones that have been around for the longest. These are things like the Toyota Prius. They have a battery, but it's a very small battery compared to any other type of electric vehicle. If you were to be able to just charge the battery, you would only get maybe 5 or 10 miles at most out of the battery. So they don't have a way to charge the battery off of the grid. They can only charge the battery either using their internal combustion engine as a generator or by recovering energy from regenerative braking. And so when we're talking about different EVs and this electric vehicle charging plan, what we're talking about are these battery electric vehicles. These are the ones that have to have charging in order to operate. They cannot operate off of gasoline or diesel. And so these are the ones that are the focus. When we talk about charging, there's also different types of charging. So there's level 1 charging, and this is the charging that comes with the car. It just plugs into a normal outlet. It draws about as much power as a hairdryer. They don't charge the car very quickly. So you can see here the analogies. It's more like watering something with a watering can. It can take 2 or 3 days to charge a vehicle up with 100 miles of range. They're sometimes referred to as an emergency charger. The next level up from that is a level 2 charger. This is like going from a watering can to a garden hose. So you get a faster rate. They will plug into a 240 volt power source, something like a dryer outlet. And that's how much power they use, is about the same amount of power as an electric dryer. They can add about 100 miles of range in maybe 10 hours, roughly. The level above that is DC fast chargers. And DC fast chargers are really a completely different game from level 1 and level 2. They go to much higher power levels, up to a size 350 kilowatts. To give you a sense for how much power that is, that's the same amount of power as a small office building would use. They require a 3-phase power source, very expensive dedicated infrastructure. But they are the only technology that can really charge a car quickly. So you can get that same 100 miles of range restored to a vehicle in 30 minutes or potentially even less with this technology. And again, what the focus of the plan is on this DC fast charger and the ability to get these vehicles quickly recharged to support long-range travel. So what is the charging plan? So South Dakota is going to be part of the network of a national network of chargers. So the NEVI program, which we'll talk about in a minute, is trying to set up a national network that will support travel of electric vehicles through, not just within a state, but also across states. So it's important to have a plan for South Dakota that will allow them to tie into that national network, support that long distance travel. It's not just to support EVs within South Dakota, it's to support EVs from out of state that are traveling through South Dakota or into South Dakota. Can be important to support things like tourism. So it's important that we do this to plan for those coming EVs that we see coming in the future. This plan will involve several different things. One is stakeholder meetings, that's why we're here today. Like Mike said, we're very early in the plan. We want your feedback, we want your input as we develop this. The plan will also be looking at different data for the current conditions in the state and the charging network. It'll be looking at policy and laws related to EV, and then also coming up with the recommendations for how should infrastructure be deployed with the NEVI funds. So when I say NEVI, well, what is NEVI? That's the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. And this came out of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or bipartisan infrastructure law, 2 different ways of talking about the same thing. So it's a program from the federal government that is really meant to jumpstart the investment into a national EV charging network. It provides funds to the states to install direct current fast chargers. And there's quite a bit of money available in the program. About $5 billion have been allocated to the states already. Another $2.5 billion that's going to be made available in competitive grants. When we look at the NEVI funds for South Dakota, in this fiscal year, there's $4 million available from federal funding. And through 2026, which is the end of the program, there will be a total of $29 million available. And in order to get this federal money, a plan has to be developed and submitted by August 1st. What the money can be used for is building out DC fast charging stations that meet certain requirements. And so the requirements are listed here. We'll talk through them. The first thing is that it's used to build out what's called an alternative fuel corridor first. So alternative fuel corridors are roads that have been nominated and designated as places that EVs should be able to travel in the future when the network gets built out. In South Dakota, all of the interstates have been nominated as alternative fuel corridors. So I-90, I-29, and the 3-digit spurs off of those are what make up the alternative fuel corridors. The NEVI funding must be used on the corridors to build out that network first. Once the network has been built out, then the NEVI funding can be used for things outside of the AFC corridors. And if additional corridors were to be nominated in the future, they would need to be built out before the money could be spent on the corridor as well. The money for NEVI also has certain requirements in terms of what the chargers have to do. So the charging infrastructure has to be that level 3 DC fast charger, as I said. Not just that, it has to have at least 4 ports. Each port has to support at least 150 kilowatts minimum. So we're talking 600 kilowatts of power at a minimum for each charging site. The chargers have to be located no more than 1 mile off of the corridor, which puts it very close to the exit. And stations can't be more than 50 miles away from another station. So in order for the whole corridor to be built out, there needs to be stations that are within 50 miles of each other along all these stretches of road. So those are the requirements of the NEVI program. And if we look at the current EV charging locations within South Dakota, so this is a map of the chargers that we have. When we look at those requirements that NEVI has for the number of ports, the power level, the location, there's only 1 charging station in South Dakota today that would meet those requirements. So in order to get to where we have charging stations every 50 miles, there's going to be a lot that needs to be added to this network. There are also some current planned stations that just they haven't been constructed yet, that will meet NEVI. So there are a couple of those as well in the state that are shown here on this map. But as you can see, there's going to be a lot of work to build out the network completely. And so as we move into planning for that, this is the purpose of the plan. How do we do this right? And with that, I'll hand you back over to Mike.
Thank you, Thomas. Great summary. And so maybe just a couple things that come up from questions that I've received from folks, and you probably wondered the same thing. How are these going to be paid for? So the bill in and of itself provides for approximately 80% of the funding up through the Investment Jobs Act be federal aid funds, and is dedicated towards this program. So it couldn't be used back for a different bridge or a highway or things of that nature. It's required to go actually towards this particular program. If the state doesn't expend those dollars, it goes back to other states that may want to expend those dollars in their state. So as we're in the process of developing this plan, there's some questions that came up. Well, who would pay the other 20% of the match for a charging station? How much are the charging stations going to cost? Those are all great questions that folks have. Charging stations, for what we're looking at for the DC fast charge, could be about $500,000. It depends upon where the grid is, what the connection is, what's required for the infrastructure build out in order to accommodate that fast charging station. Who would pay the match? It's our anticipation that it's a private entity that pays the match for that. These locations are intended to be on private property, not on state property, not on public property, but on private property. You can maybe think of a truck stop or something similar to that, where there's maybe amenities currently there right now. Having a charging station there is just another amenity that individuals that have electric vehicles could use, and of course use the other facilities there as well. That's not decided yet. Again, just trying to give you an example of some of the questions that we received. Another question that I've got is, well, why should I pay for the electricity for somebody that has an electric vehicle? And that's not the intent of it. The intent of an electric vehicle charging location would be that there's a fee to actually use that charging station. Last time I checked, I think there's the one on the wall, just put in by Electrify America. It was about 30-some cents per minute to be able to charge there. Some charge a flat fee plus a cost per minute in order to charge. So as Thomas mentioned earlier, the different types of charging opportunities that are out there, and he did a great analogy showing the water going into whether it's a fire hose or garden hose. The time to charge your vehicle, and for those of you that own an electric vehicle, you know full well that the actual charging system is inside your vehicle. It's dependent upon your battery capacity, it's dependent upon your actual charger. So it may take somebody 20 minutes, it may take you 35 minutes, or however long it would take for your particular vehicle. So we're trying to be just very general. So again, using that time frame for how long it would take to charge and the type of power coming in at one of these DC fast chargers, the intent again is to have the owner, whomever is the owner of that facility, charging a fee, a fair market fee, in order to use that charging station. So I just want to clear up a couple of questions that we've gotten so far on that. We do have the one Electrify America station in Wall. There's also one, I think, planned here in Rapid City coming up, and also potentially one in Chamberlain. So this is a rapidly changing type of a game. So as Electrify America comes in and they start identifying sites, it changes fairly frequently. But those are the squares that you see up there in Rapid City, and the square again in Chamberlain of a planned Electrify America charging station in those locations. Now, those of you that drive I-90, which I'm sure many of you do right now, you'd say, do we really meet 50-mile requirement from this point to the next? And the answer to that right now is we might not. Even though that's a requirement in the law to meet a 50-mile between station charging, we may have exceptions. We may ask for exceptions in South Dakota. We may not have the infrastructure there in order to handle a charging station every single location. So again, as we start digging into more of where are the opportunities for charging, where is the electric grid capable of providing that charging station, those are all things that we're trying to wrap our heads around as we kind of walk ourselves through this. And again, tonight is really about getting your input. We want to hear from you. We have the station boards back there. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at the boards that we have set up. The board that's kind of open right now, we have the dots back there. Those are intended to help you, to help us, understand what your priorities are. So you take a look, you grab a couple of those dots and identify what priorities you see as it relates to electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So again, we are looking for your input, and we're hoping to get you good input tonight and throughout the process. I am going to talk to you again about sdedplan.com. That's our website. It's probably one of the best ways to stay informed throughout this process. We're here tonight, but again, please engage on our website. With that, I want to open it up for some questions if anyone has any.